Next speaker is Anna Cook.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a project I recently completed, commissioned by the National Autistic Society in the UK, to explore the effectiveness of a specialist resource model for autistic students in mainstream schools. The model is called Cullum Centres. So a bit of outline about my presentation. So I'm going to start with a bit of background, some context around the study, talk you through the design, aims and methods, and then just outline some of the main findings from this research, including some psychological and social outcomes, the perceived support from teaching staff, some of the environmental factors, and their academic progress, attendance and exclusion data, and then talk about some implications of the research at the end. So a bit of background then. In 2021, the National Autistic Society Schools Report presented a very worrying set of statistics for autistic students in the UK. 3/4 of parents said that their child's school didn't meet their child's needs. Many were waiting over 3 years to receive support. 70% of autistic children said school would be better if more teachers understood them. Over half said that they don't have a quiet place to be at school and that they wanted more help to understand how to get along with their peers. And also over a half of the autistic children experienced bullying, reflecting a lot of research in bullying of autistic students and children, with over half of children and young people who are autistic have anxiety compared to those who are not autistic. So in response to this, the Cullum Family Trust, with financial backing from the Cullum Family Trust, the National Autistic Society designed and built 5 Cullum centres in mainstream schools in the southeast of England. Now, these centres are designed in alignment with research into the ways in which the physical environment can affect autistic people. So they have natural light, ventilation, quiet areas, sensory rooms, etc. And the idea is that autistic students will spend the majority of their time with their mainstream peers in the mainstream school, but they have this centre to come back to for specialist expert support and a quiet place to retreat to. So the research I did, or the research I'm going to present, is part of a broader project which looked at not only the outcomes for the autistic young people, but also for their families, the wider school community, and also the extent to which the Cullum centres were preparing children and young people for life after school. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to talk about a multi-method design, which included longitudinal surveys over a 3-year period, and interviews with autistic pupils aged 11 to 15. So these participants were recruited from 5 schools with Cullum centres and also 2 non-Cullum centre schools in the southeast of England. So we have 3 groups of participants that we were comparing here. So the autistic pupils who have a Cullum centre placement, represented by CC throughout these slides, autistic students who are in the mainstream of a Cullum centre school, and also autistic students who are in the non-Cullum centre school. So we have these 3 groups of participants that we're comparing. We also compared the Cullum centre students to non-autistic pupils within those same schools, and also looked at comparisons with national benchmark data as well. So the aim is then to examine the impact of the Cullum centres on academic, social and psychological outcomes, and our research question for the interviews were: how do autistic pupils experience school, and how does placement type shape wellbeing, relationships and identity? So we had, in terms of the methods, 119 autistic pupils and a matched sample of non-autistic pupils. We had one-to-one interviews with 12 autistic students in year 10, so aged 14 to 15. We collected routine data on attendance and exclusions, and also academic progress, which was teacher assessments in the core subjects of maths, English and science at each time point throughout the study. So the findings then, so starting with mental health and well-being, so we used the strengths and difficulties questionnaire to explore mental health, and we found no significant difference over time or across placements, and no difference to non-autistic pupils. And we actually viewed this as a positive, given the number of research studies that show a significant difference in mental health between autistic and non-autistic pupils. We did, however, find a difference between girls and boys, with girls showing higher internalizing symptoms than boys, again reflecting previous research. And interestingly, when we looked at peer problems, which is a subset of the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, we found a significant difference between autistic and non-autistic students, with the non-autistic pupils showing an increase over time in their peer problems compared to a decrease in peer problems for the Cullum Centre pupils. So perhaps this is implying that the Cullum Centres are enabling better peer relationships. Similarly, we also had a significant difference in subjective happiness, with Cullum Centre pupils showing a slight increase over time in their subjective happiness compared to a decrease in the sample of non-autistic peers. We looked at sense of school belonging because this provides us with a measure of inclusion. It sort of reflects the way in which a student feels a sense of connectedness and acceptance within their school. And what we found was that there was a general decline in sense of school belonging over the 2-year period. But as you can see from this graph, the green line at the bottom is representing those autistic students within the non-Cullum Centre settings. So these non-Cullum Centre autistic students are influencing this finding, with the students who are in a Cullum Centre school showing a fairly stable sense of school belonging across time. And when we looked at what predicted sense of school belonging, we found that the strongest predictor was perceived teacher support, followed by having a Cullum Centre placement, and then followed by peer support. In terms of the social outcomes, there was a mixed picture of social or peer satisfaction or friendship satisfaction over time. There was a significant increase in friendship satisfaction across all settings, and no significant difference in placement type. Cullum Centre pupils showed a rise in their number of best friends that they could turn to. However, in the interviews, the Year 10 interviews revealed mixed friendship satisfaction. This quote here, "I don't really get along with most people in the mainstream. I'd just like to be friends with a few people in the Cullum Centre." And we also found, interestingly, a significant decline in perceived peer support over time, and bullying reported across all of the interviews and focus groups. Perceived teacher support, so there were no differences according to time or placement, but we did find that perceived teacher support was a key predictor of a number of outcomes listed here. And when we talked to ex-Cullum Centre pupils, those who had left the Cullum Centre schools, there was strong positivity about the support they'd received from teachers. The first quote here, "It greatly boosted their social skills and they didn't know where they'd be today without them, without the Cullum Centre support." And the second quote there, talking about how it helped them develop their independence and gave them confidence. The physical environment was a common theme across all strands of data, with the general sensory difficulties in the wider school contexts, crowded, noisy corridors and classrooms, chaotic lessons and over-decorated classrooms, which often leaded to heightened stress and shutdowns. And in contrast, the reflections on the Cullum Centre was that it provided an important space to support their learning and comfort and well-being. And Cullum Centres were often described as a safe space, with quieter, less overwhelming environments. This pupil here said, "I do come here when I'm overwhelmed, as well when I need, to let some things off my chest, things that I find helps." And also providing respite from sensory challenges within the mainstream. So this student here said, I have tests in here as it's a quieter environment compared to the clicking of pens, the coughing, the sneezing. So, and many of them described how it provided them with an emotional security. In terms of academic progress, we found a significant interaction over the over the 2-year time period, with, the top line there shows the non-Cullum Centre pupils, so a decline in their academic progress over time, but those students in the Cullum Centre schools showing an increase over time, the red line showing those who have a mainstream placement within Cullum Centre schools. And when we looked at what predicted academic progress, we found that having a mainstream placement within a Cullum Centre school was the strongest predictor, followed by having a Cullum Centre placement and then gender, with girls showing a greater increase. Perhaps the most striking results were the attendance data. And these data here show, the blue bars show the whole school attendance. The graph on the left is the Cullum Centre schools, the one in the middle is the national average, and on the right is the counties average, the 3 counties that we were working in. And what we found was a significant difference in the attendance gap between whole school attendance and autistic pupil attendance. So the orange bar there is the Cullum Centre pupils attendance, and the green bars are the non-Cullum Centre autistic students. So this was a very positive result for Cullum Centre attendance. And similarly with exclusion rates, we found a significant difference between the number of exclusion days given to Cullum Centres, a much lower mean exclusion days compared to the non-Cullum Centre pupils. So in conclusion then, the benefits of the Cullum Centre model are varied. There was signs of much greater school belonging and subjective happiness. Pupils described the Cullum Centres as a safe, calm space where their anxiety was reduced, and so was their sensory overload. The Cullum Centres had the potential to improve emotional regulation and social confidence. And also, autistic students in Cullum Centre schools had greater academic progress. Many of them described having optimism for their future, beyond school into higher education and beyond into employment as well. And Cullum Centres would instill a sense of confidence and independence and resilience beyond school life. Very quickly then, I know I only have a short amount of time, in terms of the implications for practice, across all of the research we found that these kinds of things could be extended or generalised beyond Cullum Centre schools. So collaborative planning between staff, pupils, families and the local authority, whole school staff training, so really thinking about the strategies and the collaborative working practices of staff. Peer inclusion initiatives to try to increase peer understanding and reduce the level of bullying within schools. Quiet sensory-friendly spaces, tailored transitions, and ongoing monitoring and emotional well-being. And in terms of policy and research, there's definitely a need for greater funding, sustainable funding for centres like Cullum Centres, standardising of admissions and transitions, and tracking those long-term outcomes over time with more longitudinal research, and also evaluating social, emotional and mental health support, which was seen to be lacking in our current system, and sorely needs more research and policy interventions to improve. Here are my references, and please do get in contact if you're interested in finding out more. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alex. We have any questions? We have 3 minutes on the timer there. If you wait for the microphone to come to you.
Hi there, thanks for your presentation. Just considering Agnieszka's research as well, do the teachers working in the Cullum Centres have like specialised autism training or that you're aware of? Was that part of your research?
Yes, so the heads of centres all come with specialist autism training, and they will also recruit specialist teachers with autism training. But then there are a range of teaching assistants, learning support assistants who are trained within the school using the National Autistic Society training modules. And indeed, all staff within the Cullum Centre schools are receiving that National Autistic Society training as well.
Another question? Is there a hand there in the middle of the row?
Hi, thank you very much. That was fantastic. I'm curious in terms of being alongside mainstream. and helping peer relations and that as well. And the misconception sometimes that, students are like, oh, they get to go to the Column Centre, I want to go to, in terms of that, was there anything kind of feedback from the non-autistic students who maybe would suddenly like to attend and that as well? I was just wondering the impact on that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And some of the Column Centres are built within the fabric of the school, and others have a separate building. And we found that this was an interesting sort of difference in terms of the physical environment. Some of the Column Centre students didn't like to be seen to be walking to their centre because of the stigmatisation or the stigmatising from non-autistic students. However, and some of them, would prefer to actually not access the resource as a result. But the non-autistic students that we spoke to or that we surveyed showed a very high level of acceptance. In fact, some of the heads of centres were talking about the way in which the school culture or ethos has completely changed as a result of all this additional peer awareness raising that has been done. So much so that, for example, in the dining hall, if the Column Centre students want to come right to the front of the queue and take their lunch first in order to go and take it back to the Column Centre, no one bats an eyelid. It's just accepted that this is the way it is in this school. And if there is any bullying, obviously there's bullying in every school, the centres would invite the perpetrator into the Column Centre to show them what they're doing here and, again, raise awareness within the centre. So, lots of strategies that were really highly effective.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
If we could hold any other questions until the end. We're not in a mad rush to leave at the end. Thank you very much, Anna Cook.